Hello, and thank you for watching our STEM Ambassador in Scotland 2023 careers interviews. Today we are talking to Dr. Felicity Carlysle-Davies, who is a teaching associate in forensic science at the University of Strathclyde. So Dr. Carlysle-Davies is going to tell us a little bit about the route that she took to get where she is today and a little bit of what her job entails. And then we've got some questions that some students have sent in that we'll be asking. So without any further ado, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Felicity, and I'm currently a teaching associate at the University of Strathclyde, but you're probably asking yourselves, what does that actually mean? So I work at the university teaching the students. So this involves giving lectures, preparing instructions, helping the students in the laboratory to carry out their experiments. I also develop assignments and exam questions, and then I also have to mark them all. The particular department that I work in is the Department of Pure and Applied Chemistry, specifically within the Centre for Forensic Science. So my role is training the forensic scientists of the future. And this means that a really important part of what I actually do is speaking to current forensic scientists to make sure that what I'm teaching is accurate. I really, really enjoy my job because no 2 days are the same. I get to do a wide range of things, and I also feel like I'm making a difference by being there to support my students, but also because I feel like I'm developing the next generation of crime fighters. And for me, it was really important to actually try and have a job where I did feel like I was making a difference, and I definitely feel it here at Strathclyde. So how did I get here? I've always had an interest in science. And then when I was at school, I took part in something called the Salters Chemistry Challenge, which I think might actually still be running now. But part of one of the activities was to try and solve a crime by looking at samples from a suspect's shoes. So a crime had been committed by a chalk cliff, and it was possible to detect chalk in the soil that was on someone's shoes using some basic chemistry. And this really sparked a lifelong interest in forensic science and meant that it was a career path that I started to seriously consider. But I should say I was still pretty indecisive, so I did still think about other potential careers, such as becoming a lawyer, or at one point I considered joining the RAF or military police. And when I really got into watching The West Wing, there was definitely a period of time where I just wanted to be a speechwriter. Um, but so I was at school in the English system, so I was doing A levels and AS levels. Unsurprisingly, because I was so interested in science, my focus was on the science subjects. So I took chemistry and biology at AS and A level, and physics and maths at just AS level. But then I also took history at AS and A level, which might seem like a bit of a wild card choice, but it's actually been really helpful in my studying and my career going forward. So studying history gave me the skills to take information, pull it together to create an argument and make a coherent point about a particular event. It also worked on my written communication skills, which is something that's really important for a subject such as forensic science. So I'd always suggest pairing your science subjects with something like history or English, just to give you those communication skills and writing skills. When I was looking at then choosing my degree, there weren't many undergraduate courses in forensic science and they weren't accredited. So the careers advice I got was to do a science degree and then specialize in forensic science at master's level. So I picked biochemistry, again, kind of being a bit indecisive because I liked biology and I liked chemistry, but I wasn't sure I wanted to study either one of them exclusively. So biochemistry brought the two things together. And what was great with my degree there is it gave me an understanding of some of the techniques and lab skills that I'd need going forward for my master's. And while there are now lots of accredited undergraduate forensic science degrees, you do also have the option of doing a more general science degree and then taking a master's course. There isn't really a right or wrong way to do it, but you do want to take a course that's accredited by the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences. After my undergrad, I then came up to study for my master's in forensic science at Strathclyde. And on this course, I gained skills in team working, oral and written communication, and problem solving, as well as more specialist skills in the form of carrying out particular techniques to collect and analyse evidence. As part of my degree, I spent 3 months working at the Forensic Explosives Laboratory carrying out a research project. And I would highly recommend looking at degrees that give the option of some time working in industry as part of it. It gives you the opportunity to get used to being in that working environment and work out a bit more what things you like doing and maybe also what things you don't like so much. It also gives you great experience that you can include on your CV and at interviews. So at this point, my career path and plan had been relatively straightforward once I decided that forensic science was what I was going for. But then after my research project, I really wanted to go and work at the explosives lab. I'd loved my time there. It was so interesting. It was one of the few places where you can kind of ask people if you can actually see some stuff being blown up and they won't look at you like you should be on some kind of security list. So it was a brilliant place for me, and I'd really found a topic I was passionate about. But getting a job there wasn't an option as there was a recruitment freeze. So I had to pivot my plan, and I applied to do a PhD back at Strathclyde on the topic of explosives detection because I'd enjoyed my time at the explosives lab so much and felt passionate enough about the topic to spend at least 3 years working on it. I was lucky enough to be successful in my application, and so I spent the next 4 years working on my PhD. During that time, I did my best to get as many different experiences as possible. So that included helping out with other research projects that might be in different discipline areas, also going to international conferences, as well as also organising student conferences and also setting up a postgraduate researchers society. If I'm honest, some of these things did mean that my actual PhD took a bit longer to finish than it maybe needed to, but it all gave me additional skills that I've used going forwards. And it meant that my PhD was actually a really great positive experience. Some people towards the end of their PhD kind of talk about it being really stressful, but I had the time of my life. I met some of my closest friends during my PhD, and I'm sort of still in touch with them. My maid of honor was in my PhD sort of research group, things like that. But towards the end of my PhD, I had to pivot again, as my plan had been to go and try and get a job at the Forensic Science Service. And in 2012, the government announced that it would be closing. So no job opportunities there, unfortunately. But I was lucky because my PhD supervisor had put me forward for an internship with the Forensic Science Special Interest Group. And when that internship finished, I was encouraged to apply for a full-time job within the wider knowledge transfer network organisation. And this role meant that I had this job where I was trying to get forensic science providers, the police, government, and academics from university to work together. It meant I got to be part of some important meetings and see some really cool technology that was being developed. But it was also incredibly frustrating because forensic science was not seen as a priority for the government, and I had to work on other things that didn't interest me as much within the knowledge transfer network. And I did miss being in the lab. I missed kind of using that research part of my brain as well. So when I saw a job advertised at Strathclyde that would be back teaching on the course I'd studied on, I jumped at the opportunity. But I was actually unsuccessful the first time. I luckily was encouraged by a friend to get some feedback. And I found out that basically I had missed out by one place. Basically, I was their second choice, and the person who'd got the job ahead of me had had some experience of working as a forensic science practitioner, and of course that's a great skill and one that I didn't have. But this gave me the confidence to apply again when another job was advertised, and this time the job was successful, and so I've been at Strathclyde ever since. I started off as a teaching assistant. I've now been promoted up to a teaching associate, and I teach on our master's programme and also on our undergraduate forensic and analytical chemistry programme as well. So I do a real mixture of things. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I teach a lot of stuff to do with trace evidence, which actually goes back to that chalk on the shoe from the Salters Chemistry Challenge. We look at unknown substances, things like also identifying paint, powders, glass, all those kind of things. And then I also, because I got experience within my biochemistry degree, teach some topics to do with the use of drugs of abuse, their effects on the body, and toxicology as well. But so it's not been the straightest path to get where I am now, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've picked up lots of different experiences along the way, lots of skills that I can now use. Things to do with organising events mean that I'm quite happy to get people together and bring in practitioners for lectures. All the marking reports and everything, it all kind of comes together. And so no experience is a bad experience. You just take it forward and keep going to where you find out where you're happy. And certainly at Strathclyde at the moment, I enjoy the teaching that I do. I love the students, even if they do sometimes drive me crazy. And I'm really looking forward to carrying on this year. Every year, a new group of students, get to see them through. And then I love hearing about when they've got a forensic science job at the end of it as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So many brilliant takeaways from that, and sort of top tips and advice for our young people watching. I think for me, the sort of things that you're saying about trying to get some experience in working in industry, so you can see both sides of it. You might enjoy the subjects, but actually seeing it in real life. I think as well what you're saying about asking for feedback and not being, you know, frightened if you don't succeed, if you apply for something and don't get in. And I think it's something that a lot of us do is, we'll apply for a course or a job or something and get a no, you've not been successful, and just like, right, okay, that's that then. But yeah, you asked the question and it was quite a straightforward answer. So that's brilliant. And I think as well, great advice there about the accredited course, because it's so difficult for our young people, the amount of options that are out there, to see what to actually go for. So one of the questions that did come from our young people was about studying at Glasgow. Was there a reason why you chose that course in particular, or was it just where the course was at that time?
So yeah, so when I was actually picking my master's course, there were only 2 accredited programs at the time at master's level. So my choice was going to King's College London or going to the University of Strathclyde. And I picked Strathclyde. I had offers from both, and I decided that I didn't much fancy living in central London, and it would take me out of my comfort zone a bit to come up to Scotland. But the course seemed like the best fit for me, and so that's why I ended up here, and then have kind of pretty much been here ever since.
Best place to be. So another question that came in. So how many years in total did you study after school then?
So I was about 8 years. So because I did my undergrad down in England, it was just a 3-year BSc. Then I had a year for my master's, and then my PhD ended up taking about 4 years. Normally, your minimum duration of study is about 3 years, but I did take a bit longer for some of the reasons that I mentioned in my talk just there.
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter, does it? You got there and you enjoyed it while you were doing it. The work that you're doing just now, one of the young people are asking is it mostly practical work or theory, or do you get a good balance of the two?
I get a pretty good balance of the two. So I do a reasonable amount of theory teaching, but actually I'm also in the laboratories most weeks, kind of helping students do their laboratory exercises. So I'm in there to make sure nothing blows up that's not meant to be blowing up and those kind of things. And then in the summer, when our students do a research project, some of them go out like I did, but others also actually stay in-house with us. And so then I also get more hands-on research during the summer as well, because I get to suggest project topics of things that interest me for the students to then research.
I suppose it means that you sort of have to keep up to date as well with the
Yeah.
practical side of things, which must be quite interesting. You mentioned really good tip there as well about not necessarily taking all science or all STEM subjects, which I think is a route that a lot of people think that they have to go down sort of one side or the other. So a question that came in was, what was your actual favourite subject at school, do you think?
It's tricky. It would probably come down between chemistry and biology. I found probably chemistry a little bit more challenging, and sometimes I like the challenge, and I think I prefer the experiments and things you can do in chemistry. Biology maybe came actually a bit more naturally to me, and I found it easier, and obviously things you find simple you tend to enjoy. So it's probably a bit of a split decision between biology and chemistry, which I think is why I then ended up doing biochemistry as my undergraduate degree.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, there's so many degrees as well where you can combine things, which is definitely something to look at. Um, we've got a question here. Do you, in the role that you're in just now, then get to work with the police, or are you just sort of training people up that might be involved in that?
So I personally don't at the moment, but some of my colleagues do. So we do actually run a forensic review service. So we do provide advice if people come with cases, potentially if defence lawyers are wanting another pair of eyes to look at what has been done previously. The majority of those cases that kind of happen at the moment are more on the biological side, which is why I haven't really been as involved. But I'm hoping to in the future, if there are things that fall under the areas of expertise that I have, then be getting involved with our forensics review service as well.
Really interesting area to be in. And the last question, is there a lot of job opportunities in that sort of field that you're aware of?
So it varies. It will fluctuate a little bit depending on what's happening and where you're prepared to go. So in Scotland, there's a bit less availability because we have one provider of all our forensic services. So the Scottish Police Authority Forensic Services do all the forensic science work, and that's split across 3 or 4 sites. So the biggest one is at Gartcosh with the Scottish Crime Campus, which is very nice. The building is designed like a chromosome, so it's got all these different arms of it. There's also a site in Dundee, Edinburgh, and then I think there may also still be a site in Aberdeen. And so they tend to go through cycles of where they have particular demand in a particular area. Then they'll suddenly hire a lot of drugs chemists, or they'll suddenly hire a lot of DNA analysts. But because it's the one provider, there's not quite as much flexibility. But down in England, there are lots of different providers. It's a very different system. And there are generally, I would say, a couple of adverts a month for different jobs, depending on what area you want to specialise in. There's also kind of routes in sideways as well. So there's jobs that are not necessarily saying forensic scientist, but are getting your foot in the door within these organisations. And I know quite a few people who've done that. They've kind of gone in as a productions manager, which is somebody who takes the evidence from the police, makes sure it's all properly logged, and then passes it on to the forensic scientists. And they've done that for a little while, and then that's allowed them to then move into a forensic scientist role as well. So there are definitely career opportunities, but sometimes you have to look slightly sideways to get into them.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. All that remains to say is thank you again. I think some really, really good takeaways for our young people. I will just say I'll pop a link as well under this video. We at CERC, where I work, have got some great activities that educators might look at, very much along the lines of what Felicity was talking about, with sort of looking at footprints and looking at soil samples and things. So if you are interested in that sort of thing, there are some things that you can have a little look at and a play about with. But thank you very much again for your time, Felicity.
That's right, my pleasure.
Thank you.